The internet has undoubtedly made media investigation and archival easier than ever, and people searching to find media that fell through the cracks of these efforts is currently one of the web's biggest communities. With how much niche information is on the internet, it's surprising how much gets forgotten, especially with media with such novelty or ties to major intellectual properties. The lost media searches that have gotten wider publicity over the years have made for some intriguing stories, and documentation of which has made fruitful online careers for many people. But although I do enjoy researching forgotten products of their time, and have been entertained by the stuff that's come out from the community, I've never been inclined to personally involve myself in any lost media search. That was until a little while ago, when I stumbled into my own personal search for obscure media, and although it is short and doesn't have many twists, I still felt it was entertaining enough to see to a conclusion, and obviously turn into a YouTube video since I don't really have much else going on. So come along as I take you through the story of, and justification in hindsight for, my search for Spongebob Squarepants Darts, the forgotten first SpongeBob mobile game.
If you know anything about SpongeBob video games, then you're definitely familiar with their main publisher for many years, THQ. Nickelodeon and THQ have essentially always had a symbiotic relationship. All of THQ's output mostly consisted of licensed games, even in their early years, so Nick would let them publish games based on shows like Ren and Stimpy occasionally in the early 90s, and Rugrats in that franchise's cultural peak later in the decade. This partnership proved to be so beneficial that in February of 2001, Nickelodeon made a deal to expand their agreement with the company, giving them license to make products based on several of their biggest properties, including SpongeBob Squarepants. They would develop a handful of SpongeBob games throughout the early 2000s, including a few well-regarded console platformers, as well as some lesser remembered portable and PC games. Since the show was Nick's flagship series, SpongeBob was given a lot more room under third parties to explore new marketing opportunities. And luckily for THQ, a new and intriguing medium for licensed games was just hitting its stride around this time. In the early 2000s, mobile phone technology was becoming increasingly more advanced, and the idea that you could play a video game on the same device you call your doctor about that weird wart on was becoming more and more realized. Performance was increasing exponentially, visual and audio capabilities were becoming usable, and recently industry-standardized development software like Java and Brew were perfect for studios to make bite-sized applications with. This was all years before the iPhone blew the lid off smartphone technology, and there were still plenty of limitations. But this increase in capability gave a lot of potential for games with more horsepower than Snake to be played on your phone. THQ was actually a relatively early adopter to this burgeoning market, creating the division THQ Wireless in May of 2001 to work on mobile games exclusively, and quickly snatching the mobile game rights for properties like the NFL, WWE, and publishing rights for plenty of Intellivision titles and classic arcade games. And when Nickelodeon signed a deal with Verizon Wireless to make content for their Get It Now mobile storefront in September of 2003, this new branch of the company was tasked with making more licensed games for the service. THQ would have their own booth at E3 in May of 2004, showcasing a bunch of upcoming games from all of their partnerships. The main draw for Nickelodeon was the tie-in game for the first SpongeBob movie, which would release a few months later, but other SpongeBob products were on display. Since their wireless division had built up some rapport and a sizable catalog of upcoming releases, THQ also had a section for this branch as well. It mostly consisted of arcade game ports, a few other tie-ins like Worms and Hello Kitty, and naturally the mobile phone version of the SpongeBob movie game, as well as two smaller SpongeBob games, one of those being SpongeBob Squarepants Darts. This game would be developed by 1C Wireless, a smaller team under the larger Russian game company Cybeco. Later in May of 2004, SpongeBob Darts would officially release on the Get It Now storefront, or at least as far as I can tell. We'll get back to it. And in fall of 2004, the game would have a wider release to even more stores and devices. The game was reasonably popular, at least on Get It Now, with it being the best-selling kids game on the service for months after its release. But despite its popularity and its significance as the franchise's first leap into the mobile game market, or more likely because of its uninteresting premise and gameplay, it's unfortunately become a forgotten obscurity in the history of SpongeBob games over the many years after its release. But this is when we get introduced to the true hero of this story, some white guy.
Hi. I was introduced to SpongeBob Darts after looking at the Wikipedia list of SpongeBob games, while the topic of release dates or something came up while I was playing Revenge of the Flying Dutchman with someone. When I first saw the phrase SpongeBob Darts, I thought that the mundaneness of a mobile phone darts game combined with one of the most popular and famously personality-filled cartoon characters was pretty amusing, so naturally I wanted to find all I could about this enigma of a game. But unsurprisingly, this game's footprint on the internet was pretty small, and it was difficult to piece this game story together, or even to just see what the game looked like for myself. Though to be fair, a lot of these early 2000s mobile games are pretty obscure, but I could find plenty of information about the movie game port and all the other SpongeBob mobile games I could find. And so, from what little I could find, I could tell this was a piece of history that was close to being forgotten. And although I couldn't save it from that per se, the least I could do was try to get my hands on it.
Fortunately, I did manage to find a single site that had the ROM files for the game, but the steps required to download it were weird. This website had a system where you could pay to get a premium account, and certain categories on the site are locked behind having this tier. That's a weird payment system for a ROM site in general, but they don't just have a donate button that instantly gives you a premium account or something. Instead, you have to go to another site that, from what I can tell, is unconnected to this one, and buy a piece of digital art. And they do also word it in a way that strongly pushes towards paying in cryptocurrency. It was like 1 AM when I found this site, but fortunately I wasn't delirious enough to buy an NFT in order to play this dumb mobile game. I was, however, tired enough to rope other people into this, and in doing so would accidentally perform an act of morally ambiguous espionage. Hello everyone. I'd like you to meet my partner in crime, my good friend and accomplice.
It's good old Dragsaw.
As previously mentioned in the video, I found one site that had the files for the game. The only way that you could get the files off of the site is if you buy essentially an NFT, which, if I remember correctly, the least expensive...
was $15.
The cheapest of which
crypto.
was $15. Not specifically crypto, but heavily implied to be. There really was no other option. So I did what any self-respecting person would do, and I made a tweet to say like, oh, there's the site for the game that I'm looking for, but I gotta buy an NFT, And then I get a DM from one of my good friends that was concerning, but also sort of enlightening in a way. Why don't you tell me your side of that?
So I was going on the internet, subscribing to my girlfriend's OnlyFans, because they weren't getting enough followers on it, and I wanted to make them feel better. After I'd done that, I went over to Twitter and saw that something was troubling my friend Bron's show. There was this game that he wanted really badly, but there was only one site on which it was available. So I messaged him. I'm like, listen, my friend, there's got to be somewhere on the internet where we can find this game without paying for it. And I search Spongebob Darts Nokia ROM. Spongebob Darts Nokia 3380 ROM. Darts, SpongeBob, like all sorts of different random combinations, right? I want to emphasize with no exaggeration that there was nowhere else that this game was because the game is called SpongeBob Darts. We searched on Internet Archive, we searched on basically every ROM site, which there are not even that many ROM sites for Nokia games to begin with. Each and every time, I could only find the one site that Bronze was alluding to. So this is when the cogs in my brain started to turn a bit. You see what I'm saying? They don't own this game. They don't own the rights to it. What right do they have to put a paywall in front of it? I understand wanting to get paid for your time and your work. It was like as if you would want to do it in the most complicated and suspicious way possible by funneling it through heavily encouraged cryptocurrency, NFT equivalents. The way I saw it was that, like, it was very easy for these guys to rip us off. Because there was no guarantee that they'd even give us the account, or even if the ROM that they had was working, right?
That's why I keep saying that the story is very morally ambiguous.
So I joined their Discord server. I garner a rapport with the mods and with the friends with my silver tongue and natural charisma, and then tell them, hey, I'm having issues with my premium account on the site. But the truth is, I never had such an account with these folks, and neither did Bronze. There's this game I'm trying to download that I should have access to, but unfortunately it's still giving me a paywall. Well, listen, this is a one-time thing that we'll do for you. And then they went, and they got the SpongeBob Darts game. Immediately, when I got what I wanted, I dumped them like a ton of bricks and made off scot-free.
That's really the main part of the story that's like, ooh, you know? Cause like, technically speaking, we did steal from a small business and post their products online for free.
But haven't you heard that there's no ethical consumption under capitalism at the end of the day?
That is true. We're like the Robin Hoods of archiving.
I was just gonna say, you took the words right out of my mouth. We are like the Robin Hoods of the digital preservation age.
I guess you could say it was a lot of work, but it was also just two nerds googling things at 3 AM.
Well, you could say it's a lot of work, but then you look at the game and you're like, you know what? I'm glad that this is accessible for everyone to play.
That is true. It was definitely worth it. But yeah, if you want to see the game, for some reason, it is on the Internet Archive. Link in the description. Be sure to subscribe to Dragsaw because he makes a lot of very similar, he's a big SpongeBob fan. He goes into a ton of SpongeBob lore on his channel, so be sure to check out a few of his videos.
Some people say too much.
There's no such thing as too much SpongeBob lore.
And so, after our little fun escapade, we were finally able to play Spongebob Squarepants Darts. It's fine. A little sluggish to play, and the hit detection is pretty inconsistent for a game like Darts to be played properly, but I'm sure they didn't have much to work with while making this. But unfortunately, just because I had the game in front of me doesn't mean that all my questions are answered. And since this video doesn't have a lot of structure anyways, I'm gonna go through a couple rabbit holes I found while looking into this game, since for some reason this topic of all things is the upper limit to my researching capabilities.
One of the things I had a real hard time finding out was a solid release window for the game. Semi-official, yet still unsourced sites give a range from October of 2003 at the earliest to August of 2004 at the latest, and at first there wasn't any way to confirm or disregard any of these claims. The earliest dated reference to the game being released was a Verizon press release, which stated that it was the most popular kids game on the Get It Now platform in May of 2004. And with it being showcased at E3 that same month alongside a bunch of other mostly unreleased games, this seems to suggest that, from what I can tell, the game was released shortly after E3 ended and immediately shot up in popularity, which sounds like a weird release and again isn't confirmable, but not totally unreasonable given what little I could find. Once I was able to play the game, I didn't get much new information, although the copyright year being 2003 did throw a wrench in my theory. Somewhat related, but there's also a very of-the-timesly violent Spanish Flash game about throwing darts at SpongeBob while he's tied to a wheel, which I could only date back to 2013 and was released to the site acool.com, although it is a frankly poor translation of the original game, so it could realistically be released earlier. I bring this up not because I want to, but this might be where people get a 2003 release date from, and also because some places say there's a PC version of SpongeBob Darts when they're definitely just talking about this Flash game. Either way, in my opinion, there isn't enough information to reach any firm conclusion on when this game released, which I'm clearly taking very well. While I was looking into the company that developed the game 1C Wireless, I found a short list of games they worked on in the About page of their old website. The list of games they made with THQ gets etc'd, but fortunately Spongebob Darts is one of the listed games, alongside the similarly titled Simpsons Darts / Simpsons Billiards, which also piqued my interest similar to its Nickelodeon counterpart. I know both THQ and 1C released other Darts games and other Simpsons games, but this was yet another licensed mobile game I hadn't seen before. I naturally got curious as to its relation to Spongebob Darts, since it's literally the same concept but with a different media property. If it was developed by the same team, then maybe one of them is a reskin of the other, which wasn't a lot, but it would have added something to either game's origins. But to my surprise, this game turned out to be even more forgotten than the SpongeBob version. With how dedicated the Simpsons fandom is, you'd think there would be something about it anywhere, but no. I tried to find another site that just acknowledges this game, but except for a LinkedIn page for one one of 1C's ex-software engineers, there was literally no threads for me to pull on. So while thinking I was so cool for digging up information about a forgotten SpongeBob game, I had accidentally stumbled upon a much more legitimate piece of lost media than what I was looking for, and another victim of the licensed dirt game curse that I had apparently discovered. Finding images of the game was actually pretty easy, since the SpongeBob fan wiki already had a few screenshots. One of the images on the site, however, definitely stood out among the rest. It was from the game, but it was much higher quality than any other image of the game online. It's labeled as a screenshot on the wiki, but it's actually one of the images found in the game's files, albeit still higher definition than the version of the game I had found. It was added to the wiki in May of 2017, and I wasn't able to find this image anywhere else online to my knowledge, so the only thing I could really do was try and get in contact with the wiki user that added the image. So after some sleuthing, I managed to find their email and wrote a quick message asking them where they found the image. I usually don't like to contact people while researching stuff like this, especially since I hadn't decided to make a video about the game yet, and I had the thought in the back of my mind that it was a weird thing to email someone about, and that it most likely wouldn't lead to any new big information. But despite those thoughts, I gathered the courage, sent the message, and patiently waited for a response. After about a week, I hadn't gotten anything back, which by that point I had sort of accepted the idea that I wouldn't get anything from this and moved on. Later that day, I was doing some more cursory research when I found a page for the game on a different SpongeBob wiki, and it had that same screenshot. It was dated February of 2010, which meant I didn't need to email the first guy at all.
Am I in hell?
For the record, I also tried to reach out to the person who added the image to this site as well, but considering they've been inactive on the site for a decade, I don't think this lead is going anywhere.
And so, with all of those loose ends, I guess, tied up, that was all of my investigation into Spongebob Squarepants Darts. As you may have guessed by now, deep diving into obscure topics that pique my interest is a pastime of mine, so it was fun to share one of my personal mysteries with you all. And plus, it's cool to think that I had some hand in uncovering the history of a franchise like SpongeBob, no matter how small of an effort or obscure of a topic. I tried to spin all of this into some sort of narrative, but really this was just a more fulfilling way to organize and showcase all of the information and unanswered questions that I had while looking into this game. And remember, I'm just one guy, so if you felt inspired to continue the search in places where I couldn't, then I wish you the best of luck, nerd. But yeah, that's the end of this weird pseudo-lost media video, so if nautical nonsense be something you wish, then like this video. That was so fucking cheesy. And if you want to drop on the deck and flop like a fish, then hit that subscribe button. We're committing to this bit, and I'll see you all in the next video.